Now, so far we've used a number of native PHP functions, that is, functions that come with PHP by default. We can use them at any time. But we can also create our own functions. And the point of creating our own functions is that sometimes we want a bit of code, a bit of logic that we want to apply to varying data. So for example, if you remember our peach example from before, we created some random text, a random adjective and a random adverb, and some random punctuation around this peach idea. Well, what if we wanted to switch that up a bit and use some random generated strings for other purposes? Like, for example, creating a twister dial that will tell us exactly which color it put which limb on. Well, as we'll find out as we work through the examples, we can adjust our code slightly and wrap it in a function to be able to do something exactly like that without too much work. We can make some minor adjustments and wrap a function around our code and be able to use the same function both for our peach example and for a twister dial. But first, let's go ahead and start by looking at the structure of how we define a function. I'm going to jump to our resource pack directory, and I'm going to open up the 12th step, which is called creating functions. I'm going to go ahead and copy all of the code and paste it over the code that's currently in the test.php file, and I'm going to save it. So here what we're doing is defining 3 functions, and then we have some code that's commented out where we're using these functions. Let's go ahead and look at the structure of our first one. Creating a function is actually very simple. We use the keyword function, we name the function, and the naming convention for a function is very similar to that of a string. We can use numbers, we can use letters, we can use underscores, but we can't start with a number. We can also use uppercase and lowercase letters. After the function name, we have an opening and closing bracket, and as you'll see from the structure of these other functions, we can use these in order to tell the function what parameters can be passed to it. Then we have an opening bracket and a closing bracket, and you've seen this syntax before for an if statement or a while loop, for example, and all of the code in here will run whenever we run this function. For this function, we're using the keyword return, which will return a certain value from this function. Now you've seen before where we've used a function and it returns a value of some kind. For example, we use the function explode on a string and it returned an array we could then assign to a variable. So let's go ahead and run this function. What I'm going to do is uncomment out this first line where we run simple function. I'm going to save it and I'm going to jump to the browser so we can demonstrate, and I'm going to refresh. And sure enough, it says, I am the return value from a function. If we jump back to the code, you see that what we're doing is printing the result from this function. We could have easily assigned a variable to the result that was returned from this, but we're just skipping that step here and printing it straight to the browser. Okay, let's go ahead and re-comment this out.